welcome to the Articulate podcast, where if you know.
And if you don't, well, that's somebody who does.
I am your host, Daniel.
And I'm also your host, Miles.
And, today we'll get into some topics that are maybe a little bit more lighthearted, some that are a little bit more serious. But I think I'd like to kick off today's topic with a Twitter encounter that I had earlier, which actually would have been yesterday.
We got some positive feedback in the most unlikely manner.
Right, yeah, so I made a comment on an MSNBC story.
What was that story?
It was essentially talking about how 24% of the population had the veto power, right? These rural areas had essentially a veto power over the rest of the United States, and how unfair it was because they were saying that major urban cities were essentially being overridden, and they didn't have a voice because the minority was able to control the Senate.
I wouldn't even say necessarily control, but we're able to check what was happening in the Senate.
Check, control. And I'm just phrasing it the way that MSNBC would have phrased it.
Okay.
And so I made a comment that, did we think it was fair that, big cities would essentially control all public policy that involved the entire United States? And we had a blue check. Greg Baldwin responded, and he and I we had quite the interaction back and forth.
It sounded like it started off as a typical Twitter feud, which are usually not productive.
Yeah, I mean, it was this back and forth kind of banter, and as it was going, I was looking at it and it was like, I don't know how productive this is going to be. But after quite some time of back and forth with Greg Baldwin, we were able to come to the conclusion that we can disagree, and we can have these conversations and still we can still be okay with it. We can still leave on friendly terms. And so I just had a big shout out to him, because I think that is what we need today, right? That's the reason why we set this podcast up in the first place.
I think that's the whole point of this, was to have that conversation. And it's not the hyperbolic, the world is ending, no matter what view you take to the other side, the world's ending. The back and forth, positive engagement is what happened.
Right. And he asked me about, the laws in Texas about abortion. And
which we should hit on that today. That's an interesting topic.
I don't have the strongest opinion on it, right? I'm not a big stickler on it, right? I think that abortion is not good. I don't think it's productive to society, but at the same time, I have this kind of libertarian approach to it, where I don't feel as though I can dictate medical decisions,
Yeah, there's two different views as far as libertarian views go. So one of them is, the rights to the individual, right? So in this case, the rights would be to the woman, to be able to choose what she can and can't do to her body. The other view would be the right to the individual, the baby. And in that case, the mother, you would, in a sense, take a back seat to that child, because that child cannot make any decisions for themselves, obviously. So that's the two views in the libertarian standpoint. I've heard arguments for both.
Right, and that's a left libertarian side and a right libertarian side, right? The right libertarian side would probably be a little bit more on the authoritarian side, I guess you could say sometimes.
It's odd to say that, right?
Odd to say. It would be more of an authoritarian kind of point, whereas the left is more of a social kind of aspect, which is what you would expect that from the left side, right? But he asked me this question, right, and I didn't know how to approach that in a Twitter kind of sphere, right? I get 280 characters to try to explain a point. And this was the point that I was trying to make, right? I don't feel as though I can dictate what is done on either end, right? It's a very nuanced conversation that I can't have in 280 characters.
Not at all.
I mean,
Have you given thought? Because I remember reading about this when it first came out. Have you given any thought to that, to the law in Texas? How you feel about it?
I feel, right, and again, this might come off a little bit more controversial, and it's whatever. But I feel as though states have the authority to make these kinds of laws. And the way Texas wrote their law, right, is the government actually does not have the ability to enforce this law. This is actually law that essentially the individual is able to sue the doctor or the facility that is doing these abortions, and that is what essentially shuts down these abortion clinics, right? So I think the law is very nuanced. I think it's written in a tone that I don't think we've seen yet in this country, right? And that's again another reason why it makes it so difficult to kind of approach as a law, right? I mean, it was voted on, it was legally legislated through the process, it was signed, right? So I don't have the numbers exactly of what the population voted on in Texas, of how farly skewed the numbers were. So again, that also makes it a little bit different, right? But I think that states have the right to make these laws if that's what the people decide.
Yep. And that's kind of my final view on it. I do think it might have gone a little far, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, this is something that I firmly believe the state rules should apply to that state. The people in that state should be able to vote for that. If they don't approve of that down the road, well, obviously they can vote those people out. I mean, that's at the end of the day, I think that's a good thing. Other states do things that some states believe are crazy, like the legalization of hard drugs in, was it Oregon? I know that's kind of an old thing.
Washington.
Washington, one of those states. I mean,
there's a couple of states I think have done something like along those lines.
Yeah, like they're legalizing open drug use. You can no longer arrest an individual for shooting up heroin.
As long as it's like underneath 3 milligrams, or
yeah, I mean,
4 or 5 or 6, something
like
that.
And that's where the state has the right to do that. I don't agree with that necessarily. I mean, at the same time, I am for the legalization of drugs across the board. But at the same, I mean,
we have different opinions there.
Yeah. So one state does. I think it's the right. I think it's the right decision. If you don't approve of it, though, they can. And they might end up voting all those people out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with them right there too, right? If the state decides they want to legalize or to decriminalize, drugs across the board, I think that is within their rights, right? I don't think the federal government has any business involving themselves or essentially inserting themselves in those positions, because that's what the state, that's their job, right? That's what they decided.
So I think the biggest mistake in that argument is the concept of decriminalization. I think it is a horrible. If you're going to decriminalize it, make it legal to where like a company can start to.
So you're saying regulations, right?
So when you decriminalize something, all you're doing is you're allowing the drug cartels to manufacture such product, and who knows what is in that product at the end of the day. I mean, we're seeing this huge spike in fentanyl overdoses.
Yeah. I mean, they've been mixing fentanyl in just about everything. Meth, cocaine.
Mm-hmm. So if you had those regulated, you would know what was in them. You'd know the dosage that is going into those. Kind of like alcohol, we know what goes into our alcohol at this point. In the era of Prohibition, you didn't. You had a lot of bootleg alcohol that ended up killing a lot of people. I mean, with that, you saw the rise of the mafias and really the illegal cartels here in this country. So when you just simply decriminalize, all you're doing is giving more power to the cartels, which I think nobody but the cartels wants.
Yeah, well, I think here's where the difference comes in, right? You can decriminalize it and then you can regulate it, but when you come to that point of regulating, the drugs are going to cost significantly more than they're going to get on the street, right? So you're always going to have that black market, and I don't think it makes much of a difference, right? Most of the people that are using these harder drugs are homeless or mentally ill. They can't afford regulated drugs, right? They wouldn't be able to afford, the meth that they normally get at $20 or whatever, $10. It would probably be $50, right? I think the problem exacerbates itself because you would see more thefts, maybe more violence, because it's unaffordable and they have to have it. I just think that it's a very difficult position to be in, right? I think the state has that ability to do it. I think they should be able to do it. I just think that if you're going to do something like that, right, you have to have a lot of backstops and a lot of programs behind that. And with multiple programs behind it, I think you run the increased rate of higher cost of taxation on the people. And I think that reverberates throughout the economy in that state.
So it's almost like had they, at the very beginning, not said everything was illegal and just allowed the companies to take over at the very beginning, the cost would be whatever it was. Right now, the cost is fairly low because you're having, kids are making this stuff.
Yeah,
they're obviously not
cook it up on the stovetop.
Yeah. So had it been at the very beginning, we probably would have been in a different spot. You're saying might be.
I would assume so. I mean, if you let the free market run, the free market will typically do a better job than anything can, right? But when you merge a free market with the state or with the government, it gets much more complicated. The system is no longer allowed to run freely as it was designed to do. So I think maybe if drugs had not been decriminalized from the get-go, maybe you would have had, companies that would have done a better job of ensuring a higher standard, and maybe there would have been some system that they would have been able to implement to restrict or to maybe even just curtail the amount that they could get at a time or to use. It's just too difficult to say these what-if situations.
Mm-hmm. It is, right.
So, I mean,
the whole situation is really unfortunate. I wish the U.S. did not have such a problem. I don't know if it's just strictly the U.S. I imagine populations everywhere kind of have a drug issue or addiction problem. But I can personally attest, man, there's a big problem.
Yeah.
I came from Denver, and the problem was bad there. And living here, I know the problem's bad here. I don't see it because I'm not in that sphere of influence anymore. But I know it's here. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
How you get rid of it.
Have you seen those videos? I think it was in maybe Philadelphia or New Jersey. I can't recall. But there's just this video of people, just drug addicts that are stumbling. It's almost like a zombie apocalypse, just staggering down the streets, right? And that is gut wrenching to see.
It is,
right?
That's somebody's kid, man. That's somebody's child. It's amazing.
And I think the worst part, right, is a lot of these people, these individuals, don't want help, right? There's nothing you can do.
That's true.
To save them, right? You hear this conversation of, we have all of these empty houses, we have all of these properties. Why don't we use these properties to house these homeless individuals and these drug addicts and these people that are mentally ill, right? But it goes much further than that. Most of them don't want that.
Nope.
Right? And you can't force somebody into that position.
No.
So I mean,
that's funny you say that because at work somebody was asking me because I have a history of that, and they told me I think it was like a cousin or brother, somebody closely related to them that has a severe addiction. And said, what happened to you? How did you get out of it? And I told him all that happened to me was I made the mental decision to get out of it. There's nothing that anybody could have done. There's nothing. I went to rehab multiple times. I went to live with my father for a bit. None of that did anything because mentally I still wanted you. I didn't want help. I wanted to use the system just to continue my addiction. And at the end of the day, you have to make that mental decision that, hey, I'm actually going to get out of here. And it's hard. So I have a feeling that's why a lot of people don't make that decision because it is a very, very difficult thing. But it doesn't come from an outside source. It really comes from within.
Yep, and I think that it also kind of carries through with the way the economic system is going, right? We hear all of these issues about how everything should be like this race war between races, right? And I think we've all been led that way from mainstream media to celebrity personalities. I think we've all missed the point and the topic of what we should be talking about, right? And what we should be talking about is not a race differential. It should be that we talk about what's really important is that's class, right? The ultra wealthy versus the poor,
which is
right?
Because the ultra wealthy is trying to pin this on a race war.
Yeah, and
they're really pushing this concept that the race is what's different.
It only furthers their monetary gain, right?
It absolutely does.
All they have to do is go around and buy up some of these smaller minority companies, right? Or to buy up, shares and portions, and then push a race issue, and then say, well, you have to buy from your local minority shops, right? And they're still taking a profit of that, And their entire goal is nothing compassionate most of the time.
No,
and I would say this in general, right? Yeah, I'm not trying to be, specific about a certain individual or not,
no.
Right? But I think this is one of the biggest problems with the free market system that we've got going on right now, is that it's not actually a free market.
Oh no. And what would you define that? Like, there's got to be a word.
So I think we kind of run more like some of the Norwegian countries, right? Like Scandinavia, where it's a regulated free market or a regulated capitalist system, but it's not true free market, right? And I'm not talking about laissez-faire, right? Mm-hmm. Where laissez-faire it's just a free for all, right? Free for alls tend to end rather poorly, right? So I think there's grounds for some sort of regulations here and there, especially to prevent things like monopolies, because monopoly it doesn't benefit anybody but the monopoly.
Which is true.
But I think that there could be a system where you've got mostly like a free market with just a slight touch of governmental regulations. But the way the system runs right now is you have these extremely wealthy individuals who profit, and then you've got these extremely poor, and they feel as though there's nothing they can do, right? And that's because they're told that, they're taught that, mm-hmm. Right? They're taught that they can't succeed. So what do you do?
Condoleezza Rice. It's interesting you say that. It's kind of off topic. She was kind of talking about that over the weekend on The View, or not the weekend, over the week on The View. When she was brought up, it was not, everything's going to be handed to you. Her parents told her, you're going to work for what you get. You're going to be successful. What other people say about you, do not worry about it. You worry about yourself, and you're going to succeed and do great things in life.
Yeah.
And she did.
And right, I'm biracial. So I was in that situation too, right? My parents, especially my dad, right? I was always taught to have a strong work ethic, right? I was never taught to differentiate by race or color, creed, right? Gender. I was taught that if you want to make something of yourself in the world, you have to put the effort in, right? Yes. You got to work hard. There was a period of time where I was working full time and I slept in my car. I didn't have all of the money, but it didn't stop me from continuing to persevere.
Exactly.
It didn't stop me from, I didn't turn around and look at myself as though no matter what I did, there would be no way to succeed. I just kept going.
You weren't taught you were a victim based on your father's race. Because of that, you were supposed to be downtrodden and you weren't supposed to succeed. You weren't taught that, right?
No, I was taught to do everything that I could to be the best at what I could, right? Anything that I did, I was supposed to be the best. And yes. if I wasn't the best, I hadn't worked hard enough.
There was something you could be doing different to benefit yourself at that point, which is, that's what we should be teaching all of our children.
Yeah, if you teach your child, if you teach them that aggression towards pursuing your goal, right? To be aggressive in pursuing what you want, and to never stop, and never give up, and never quit. They have almost an endless amount of possibilities and opportunities that they can achieve throughout their lifetime.
Yeah, and it does. For goodness sakes, man, I couldn't care any less what you look like. At the end of the day, I really don't. I don't care your sexual preferences. I don't care what the color of your skin is. If you're cool to me, dude, I'm gonna be cool to you. And you can see that on a playground with children. Some people say children are naturally born, racist if they're a certain color. I think that's insane. Absolutely insane.
I think that's disingenuous to say.
Very strange.
Yeah. I think that it's learned behavior.
It is.
Right. You will always reinforce your bias because that's what you're mentally capable of doing. Because that's what you feel like you have to do. Right. If you perceive something one way or another, you're always going to you don't want to look outside of that and say, maybe I'm wrong. Right. You always want to try to reinforce what you thought, because you don't like being wrong. You don't like to confront yourself and say, you know what, maybe I need to rethink this. And I think that's the situation we run into a lot these days.
That's a hard thing to do, though, to admit defeat in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think I was lucky about that, because that's kind of what I was taught. You know, I was raised as a Baptist in religion all my life.
You are very knowledgeable about the Bible.
And
that was, our viewers realize that.
That was one of the things that we were taught in church, right? Is if you're incorrect, right, you have to be able to step back, observe what had happened, and then come back and tell that person, you know, hey, you know what, you were right and I was wrong, and for that I apologize, right? You have to be able to be introspective of yourself in order to have the conversations that you need to be able to have with others around you.
It's almost like going into every conversation with the knowledge that you might actually be wrong.
Yeah.
On every subject, which is interesting because it goes back to the Twitter conversation you had.
Yeah.
You both seem to have that idea that this person, I'm not going to throw everything I have at them because, well, there might be something about what they're saying that is true that I've just never looked at. I've never had an open mind enough to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's even more nuanced than that, right? I am not the smartest person in the world, right? It's surprisingly enough to say, right? Right, I am knowledgeable in some areas, and there are other areas where I am deficient, right? And so when I have these conversations, I want to try to keep an open mind, right? Because during that encounter, I might learn something that I didn't know, right?
Yes.
And then I've got to come back and do my research and verify what was said.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, right, then I've got to admit, you know what? I didn't have all of the information coming into this. And that's why I try to maintain or try to prevent myself from jumping to these conclusions, because I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. And a lot of people, they claim they do. I think Hollywood does, probably more than anybody. They claim they know all the answers. They're always right on things. I hate it. It makes me sad.
And I think that all goes back to being able to see your bias and be able to override it and say, you know what, I don't know everything that's going on, right? I can't see the bigger picture all the time, because sometimes that picture is way too large to look at in one take. Sometimes you have to step back and look. And I don't think we see that a lot in today's environment, right? And I think that's, again, the big reason why we do this podcast, right? This isn't something that we do because we're trying to make a ton of money, right? This is something that we do because we want to have these honest conversations with people that maybe they agree with us, maybe they don't agree with us, right? But we want to have these conversations where we can talk about it across party lines. And at the end of it, you say, you know what? I don't agree 100%, but we can still be friends.
Well, they say that the iron sharpens iron, right? A disagreement amongst, that doesn't even necessarily have to be friends. A disagreement amongst people that can come out and not hate each other completely. I think they're both individuals are better off for it. We've lost that in society, and I don't know how many years it's been, to be honest, but we've lost that ability to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah,
it's almost unfathomable where we are. If you're right, or if you're on the right side of the political spectrum, it's almost like you have to hate everything the left does, and if you're on the left, you have to hate everything the right does. I think we talked about that last week. The political party system is just
it's broken.
So divided. There is the independents, the true independents, the few and far between. Are they making a comeback though? Is this something that's changing? Do you think?
I think in the sphere that we're at right now, I don't think you might see a few independents win here and there, but I think what you see is more of a populist take a shine this time and rise.
I think that's happening globally. I don't think it's just here in the States.
No, I don't think so. I think people have seen the authoritarianism that is going on, right? The tyranny with all of these governments and these states essentially declaring by dictate or edict what you can and can't do. So I think you see people kind of start having had enough of that, right? And now they're wanting to have a more honest conversation, and they want somebody that reflects what they think. So you get this more populist who is trying to give the people what they want.
I mean, Joe Biden was right when he said there are fewer democracies today than there were how many years ago there were. But there are clearly...
Yeah.
And there's really, at the end of the day, there are no true democracies in the world. Let's get that straight. The true democracy does not exist.
Yeah, and I don't know if people fully grasp the dangers of a pure democracy.
It is a bad thing.
Right?
Yes.
There's a reason why most places have some sort of setup so that it can kind of listen to both sides. Because a pure democracy is just ruled by a majority.
Those who are the ones with the biggest influence make all this system. And this is where the Constitution is written, where the minority has some power still. It's an important thing to give those with the minority voices some power. You can't take that away.
Yeah, I think it's because you have to recognize that cities, again, this all goes right back to what we opened with. Mm-hmm. Right? Our large cities don't know what rural America needs. And in our rural cities, they don't know what some of these larger cities need, right? Mm-hmm. So there has to be that nuance in who gets to decide all of the policies that are put in place. And it's a very, very tight woven system.
It's a hard, and that's what I think the hardest thing we're seeing about republics is a republic democracy, however you want to.
Constitutional republic.
Constitutional republic. There we go. It's a very fine line to walk. It is messy. Oftentimes it is rather slow in getting things done because it is hard to get so many people to agree on certain things. But I think that's the whole reason it was written, to encourage discourse, to encourage two people deciding, let's lessen our stance a little bit to try to come to a conclusion that we can both agree on, instead of just one side saying we have the majority, here's what we're going to do, damned be the rest of the people.
Yeah, I think the system was built on compromise.
Yeah,
right?
That's the word. Yeah.
Compromise it's key in everyday relationships, right? You don't get along with your spouse unless you can compromise, right? Unless you can have the honest conversations, you can communicate and compromise, right? She wants Chili's, you want Red Lobster, so you've got to compromise, right? You say, okay, baby, we'll do Red Lobster this time. Next time we'll do, chili or whatever,
I like Red Lobster.
I know, right?
I would agree on Red Lobster.
But compromise is something that has to happen in just your everyday relationships, and that carries throughout more intricate systems as well, right? The political system. You have to have compromise, and right now we're not seeing compromise. What we're seeing is left and right headbutting back and forth like rams, on the mountainside.
The only saving grace you could say would be the two senators, Sinema and Manchin. They are really the ones that are preventing the abolish of the filibuster.
Yeah, but you have to remember, those are
crazy.
Those are the closest thing that you've seen to what the Democratic Party used to be 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? They're not far left, they're not far right. They sit in the middle.
Which is cool.
Right? And that's something that the system hasn't seen, because there's a ton of Republicans that don't sit in the middle, right? They're not willing to compromise.
Yes.
Right? And I think that's our biggest problem here, is that we don't have both sides that are able to sit down and compromise in any way, shape, or form. Right? It's my way or the highway. And then we're left in these positions where, well, we'll just print a $3 trillion coin and override everybody.
that was a thing. For a minute, that was an option that was given up, that maybe they just print this coin and then all the problems go away.
Nice thought on The Simpsons.
Did they really?
The Simpsons did make an episode about a $1 trillion coin or something like that.
So they saw it, they're like, I wonder what the legality behind all this is. And they did a little bit of research and they're like, oh my goodness, we can do this.
Right, but I think that's where we're at, right? This is the system that we're in.
Is it a comedy?
It would be a legit, like, yeah.
Big words are hard.
Not today. But it would go back to, like, Shakespearean comedies, right? It's got that bit of comedy with that tragedy as well, right?
It's really sad, yeah.
There are moments where it wants to be lighthearted, and then there are moments where it just tears your heart out. And I think that's the situation we're in, right? We see these things that you think have to be a joke,
but they're not.
They're not, and it's breaking the unification of America, right? It's turning brother against brother.
And Biden, I think he tries to tread that line. I don't think he's the right person for it at all. He's definitely not a very good leader, but he tries. I mean, he wasn't for abolishing the filibuster for the longest time. I guess this past week, he was on a town hall meeting, and he sounded very open, or more open, I guess. Once, if he were to get the votes, he would vote also to abolish the filibuster. So I think it would be detrimental. You got to remember, the filibuster was used when Trump was in office to prevent some things that I didn't necessarily agree with or disagree with. Like I said, I wasn't too big into politics when he was president.
Yeah.
But it was used against him as well. It was used against the Republican Party. So for those that are saying, to save our democracy, we must abolish this filibuster. You got to remember, just a handful of years ago, had that same argument been used, we would have some policies that you would absolutely hate. We would have said, no, we need to protect. We need to protect that minority rule. It's important. The shoe's on the other foot now, and it's like they're not even seeing it that way anymore. The party in power now is, our party, so now we can get rid of it. But when they were in power, no, we gotta keep it.
See, this is where I think I would have to disagree with them. I think that Joe Biden has gone far left, almost to the point of tyranny, right? He's disregarded the Supreme Court on multiple positions. He's done some things that are just outrageous. He calls for unification at one point and then turns around in the next sentence and condemns the red side. I don't think that he is doing anything to bring a nation together, right? I think that we are more fractured now than ever.
And for people to be fired if they don't have the vaccine, if they're healthcare workers or they're police officers, everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
like it's
in a situation where our economy is already decimated, our supply chains are already decimated, right? I don't think these are productive conversations that are being had right now, and I think that Joe Biden is trying to be as radical as possible because he knows he's only going to be one term, right?
And so you think he runs again? I don't think
he doesn't run again.
There's no way
he doesn't run again. But I think that he wants to be known as this governmental altering phenomenon.
And he thinks it's a good thing.
He
really does.
He does.
Think, and I think the left does too, what they see happening. And it's redefining what it means to be in America. It's redefining our entire society, how things work.
Yeah, I mean, when you have politicians who talk about reshaping the way the economy works and functions,
like fundamentally changing the way it works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's a good thing, especially when you're talking about funding all of these things, right? There is nowhere near enough things. Like, you would end up having to tax every single individual in order to balance out what you're trying to spend right now, right? And never-ending spending is just not feasible, I think, right now in this point in time.
No, even, was it Jack Dorsey? He said that hyperinflation in one of his latest tweets, that hyperinflation here in the U.S. was the biggest threat to our society.
Wasn't that Elon?
Maybe somebody famous, and it is odd to say that because there is this sense that inflation isn't going to stop anytime soon.
No.
Especially if they do end up passing one of these bills, it's going to make it worse, which is shocking.
Well, there's only a few ways you can kind of compensate for that kind of spending, right? You either have to increase taxes, or you have to find another way, right? You have to circumvent and try to find another route in order to fund those things if you're not going to increase taxes. And that would mean that you could raise import and export kind of fees, right? But either way you do it, that still causes inflation, right? That still hits the average American citizen in the pocketbook, because no matter which way you look at it, it's going to be more expensive, right? If you tax them more, they're not going to have as much money as they need to buy what they need to survive.
And we've hit on this before, that the person that is impacted the most by this are the poor. The rich and the famous really They feel it, but not near as bad. They don't have to make that decision. Well, we're probably not going to have this meal today because we can't afford it. Yeah. We're just going to have ramen instead of trying to cook a real meal this week because we can't afford the meat anymore because everything's too expensive.
We need to have this conversation with somebody who is on the wealthier side, right?
Yeah.
I think that would be a great conversation topic to have with somebody, right? I think that it would be something maybe eye-opening that maybe everybody could kind of see and hear.
There's got to be a reason. I think every conversation we have with people, every disagreement that we have, there has to be a reason why they believe that, because they do oftentimes believe that in their heart. And what we believe in the life that we've lived is completely different than theirs. So I think we would learn. I mean, we might both learn something. I don't know if their eyes would be as open as ours would be, but we would learn something had we talked to somebody wealthy, because they have to have a reason for their beliefs too. I don't know if it is just the money, the greed behind it all, but I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a conversation to be had there, right?
It's sad.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe one day. Maybe one day we'll be rich and famous and we'll understand.
I doubt it. Yeah. But, again, it's never about being rich. It's really just about it's about having these conversations. It's about talking about things and seeing where we're at, right? And trying to bridge that divide amongst us and see if maybe we can't do something to save a country before it falls apart completely.
Oh, like every election from here on out is going to be the election to save democracy. Only if you vote on the left, though.
Well, I mean that's been the talking point for both sides, right? This is if we lose this one, it's over, right?
It's
over. That's been the thing since I would have to say probably Obama or maybe even Bush.
Was, yeah.
Right?
Was. Yeah.
I think the last rational president that we'd had was maybe Bill Clinton, right? And that's just because he didn't go out crazy spending, right? He had balanced the books a little bit.
Yeah. Wasn't his policies partially what led to that collapse in the early 2000s, though?
So that
I don't know if that was government thing.
That was deregulation of the markets, especially the housing market, right? The housing market was what caused the massive collapse in the mid 2000s, right? 2007, 2008. That was just a lot of fraudulent activity that was going on. People cutting up loans that were bad loans and reselling them, and it was really, really messy, and it was really messed up.
What caused that, right, was you didn't need to show proper papers, basically, to prove how much you made or who you were. So it's almost like having to prove certain things is a positive thing. Like, we need our papers now for our COVID. But by God, you should not have to show your papers to vote, because that's racist.
You shouldn't have papers. You should only have to show what we want you to show when we want you to show it, right? And that goes back to the tyranny that we see.
Yep.
And I don't know how many times I can hit on that point and say how dangerous this situation is that we're in, right? If we continue to let them do what they want and demand what they want by edict with no legislation behind that, you end up running into a situation where it's 1984 or V for Vendetta or a Brave New World, right? You run into these situations where freedom is scorned, right? I think even Joe Biden kind of laughed about it in his town hall 2 nights ago. It was like, freedom? Well, your freedom to give me COVID is
I laughed at that, because at that point he admitted basically that the vaccines don't work unless everybody has one.
But
if you get the vaccine, your chances of surviving are greatly increased, right? Greatly increased. So it shouldn't matter if you're around somebody who's not vaccinated. They're at a far greater risk of being hospitalized and dying with COVID. You should have no fear after that. I mean, there are cases where
the breakthroughs,
and they end up dying, going to the hospital. The vast majority have no problems whatsoever. There should be no fear after you get the vaccine. That's what it drives me insane. We are still talking about COVID. It drives me bonkers.
Yeah, but I think I was just more disturbed by the fact that the sitting president of the greatest nation in the world has ever seen, is scoffing at freedom, you know? Who needs freedom? Do you?
I'm surprised he didn't start.
Let me tell you, punk.
Yeah, whisper.
You don't need freedom. You know what you need? The shot. Amen.
I mean, that's what it is, though. It was a laughable moment. It was funny.
It is a laughable that's turned into kind of a religion, right?
For sure.
I think that right now scoffing at freedom gets you put in a situation like Australia.
What?
If you scoff at freedom and you say, you know what, your freedoms end here, right? You don't need this freedom right now. We'll give it back to you.
They won't never do that.
Yeah, I mean, what time has the government ever taken some sort of small power and given it back to the people?
No, they don't.
You know, it's never happened.
No.
It's never happened, and it never will, right?
It's crazy, right? The tracking that they're doing on their phones in Australia, that concept, it's going to go far beyond just going.
But it's coming to a government near you.
The system is in place. Where do you really think they're just going to be like, oh, actually, we're just going to abolish this system. We're not going to track anybody anymore. The system's in place, man. This ain't stopping.
But because people have used their voice, right, the IRS has been wanting to essentially check people's bank accounts for $600 transactions and monitor them.
And why is that? Because rich people are paying their taxes. So we need to check your bank account for $600.
You know how many transactions you would need to be a millionaire?
Come on, man.
Right, so there was this huge debacle about that, right? People were outraged. Banks were outraged about this, having to report $600 transactions. So the IRS was like, you know what, we need to change that. You know, we'll make it $10,000, even though it still encompasses the vast majority of Americans being able to see what's in their bank accounts, right? This is the overreach that I'm talking about. This is the situation where they're going to come at you and limit your freedoms, right? We've seen big personalities on the left and the right be defunded from banks, be locked out from Twitter and social media accounts. They've been locked out from credit card companies. They've been locked out from emailing companies, right? You think that if you give the IRS the capability to check your bank account, right? If they think that they see something terroristic or domestic, some sort of issue there, or they think that you're not paying your taxes, you think that they won't come after you and get that from you? You think they won't make it illegal for banks to come and loan you money?
Yeah, they'll take away everything. Absolutely. And it's not just the rich at that point. I mean, I get that's what their front is, but that's a lot of people.
Yeah, but how does that affect, right? That you're not going to find them skipping on taxes for little $600 issues here. This was specifically targeting poor individuals, right? The waitress who makes cash tips, right? She goes to deposit that in her bank account. Guess what? They're going to come after her for those taxes, right? You have a garage sale and you make over $600 on your garage sale. Guess what? They're going to come tax that. They're going to get that. I mean, you already paid taxes on the things that you had bought and sold, but you're going to pay the taxes again, right? The government will always get what they want, and I don't know what there is to do about it.
I don't think you can. Keep in mind, the Fed is not something we can vote on. Any of the Fed policy. Can we vote on anything the Fed does? We don't vote for.
I don't think so.
Who the Fed chair people are. We don't vote for any of their officials. They're all.
Correct us in the comments if we're incorrect on this.
Yeah,
because we will issue a correction.
To my understanding, they're all chosen by the administration. So I guess in theory, you could say
you choose it indirectly.
Yeah, in a weird way. But we don't have any say over what policies they decide. We can't vote them out if we're mad at them.
Yeah, I mean, even if the president were to be removed, the personnel would still remain in place unless removed from the next president coming into office.
Correct. I kind of wonder how much power they have over everything.
What's that?
The Fed.
Well, they were talking about giving them an exorbitant amount of funding in order to hire thousands and thousands of more people to come look at your bank account.
And this was the way they said, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to massively increase the spending of the IRS and basically everyone's bank accounts. And when they file taxes, we're going to be audited at that point. So the amount I mean, they're literally spending money to find what they're really not going to find. Let's be honest here. If you're wealthy and famous, you're going to figure out ways.
You have an account for that.
Exactly. You're going to figure out ways to get around it. It's not. I mean, that's not going to change. But the rest of the people that they missed that $100, they're going to be.
Yeah, and like that's when you hear people say, well, Amazon doesn't pay their taxes, right? Amazon turns around and reinvests all that profit back in the company, and it's not taxable because it's, we had to buy new machinery, it was all cost expensive things that we did to improve the company, to make it more efficient. There's a reason why they don't have to pay the taxes on it, right? The individuals that are working for Amazon, they pay taxes. So right, Jeff Bezos, he pays taxes.
Which is funny.
I mean, they still pay taxes in some way, shape, or form. They don't pay, a federal tax or maybe a state tax because they reinvest the profits.
But their employees do.
But their employees do, right? The company owner, he does. The CEOs do, right? All of these people still pay taxes inadvertently. So it's kind of a roundabout way of saying, Amazon does pay its taxes, just not in the way that everybody else would want. They want it to be double taxed.
Correct.
Right? But people don't understand. If you start taxing Amazon in that nature, you're not getting 2-day shipping.
No.
It just doesn't happen.
We ain't getting that right now anyways.
But
we're so far gone.
That's neither here nor there. But
so they had like an animation of what the shipping prices is down in LA, and they went back to like 2019, and there was literally maybe 5 or 6 little dots that were moving around, and they, fly in from the China area, somewhere out west. It would come in and you land in the port, and then it'd be there for a split second, then it would leave, and then the next one would show up. Do that. Well, they showed, this was on CNN, and they showed the current state of it, and there were so many little dots, and they would all just sit. They'd sit and they'd move back and forth up and down the shoreline, and then they'd move into like a queen or a key, whatever you pronounce it. A queue, there you go. and then they'd sit there for a lot longer, right? And then they'd eventually move in there. But in the meantime, you have all these other dots that were moving in. And Joe tried to address it during his town hall. He said he doesn't really know what's going to happen. He thought about maybe bringing the National Guard in, and then the White House later had to step that back and be like, we're not actually looking into that. What Joe said, don't actually take it for what he said.
Did you see what else they had to walk back?
The gas prices?
Oh, no.
Was there more?
Oh,
there was a lot of things that were really bad about that press conference. Or that town hall, whatever you want to call it.
So Joe Biden...
He's so bad.
Joe Biden said, of course America would...
it's like Taiwan, yeah. And China got pissed.
And
no.
The White House walked that one back so fast.
Like, why? Which is odd. Why would you want to walk that back? Why would you not be like, no, we're going to defend Taiwan. They're our friends, man.
Why would you not? They just launched a hypersonic missile that orbited the planet.
Oh, that was a spacecraft, though, right?
No.
That's what the Chinese government said.
It was a nuclear-capable...
They're like, no.
Craft, essentially.
It wasn't nuclear.
And I think the worst part is that our intelligence community was flabbergasted. They were like, how did they do this? What's going on?
So now they're ramping up their testing on their own hypersonic. It's like a pissing race.
I think the worst part, right, is do we believe... Okay, I believe China launched it, right? They showed right? But within 6 or 7 days since that happened, they were like, oh, we've successfully launched our own. Do you think that happened?
No.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think it happened.
I don't think so.
I don't think we had the capability. And when we saw China do it, we were like, oh, if China thinks that we can't do this, dude, we're in some deep trouble, right? So we've got it. Let's say we did it, and let's get really cracked on this technology because China's more advanced than we care to say out loud, right? If you say China's name 3 times in the mirror, they will appear and destroy you.
It's amazing that people don't realize that or don't believe how much of a threat they are. It's amazing. And it really made me mad again. I just said it a little bit. It makes me really mad that we would have to walk back, that we won't defend Taiwan. That we had to be like, oh, no, we didn't actually mean that.
We conceded defeat in Afghanistan.
That's amazing. That's a horrible, horrible look for all of our allies out there.
I mean,
what we're supposed to be the most strongest country in the world, the one that is the guiding force to the rest of the world. And if you get attacked and you happen to be attacked by China, we're basically telling you like, oh, you're kind of on your own. We're sorry.
We'll back you while we're sitting in the UN committees.
Oh, we're gonna talk about sanctioning China. That's how we'll get them.
Yeah, it's just preposterous.
It's sad.
Folks, we are on the precipice of catastrophic danger. I don't think that China even makes any kind of militaristic moves towards us. I think they see enough division inside the U.S. in order for us to fracture ourselves, and then they come in and pick up the pieces with their monetary system and their distribution chains, and turn around and prop us.
What better way to destroy a country than to simply just let the country eat itself apart?
Yeah, I mean, they own enough of our debt. Why would they destroy us, right? They
let
us destroy ourselves, come in and take the infrastructure that's already in place. People don't understand that China is by far our greatest enemy.
By far.
They're not our greatest competitor. They're not our working partners. They are a threat.
But it was Russia. Remember, Russia was the disinformation from Russia was the biggest problem.
Russia.
Everything was Russia. Everything. I mean, Russia was the reason for all the mishaps of the Trump campaigns, right? The Trump era. Everything had to do with Russia.
Trump was not. He was not the best president. He was not the worst president.
Yeah, absolutely.
He did some good things. He did some bad things. But
Biden sucks, though. Let's be honest.
Under a Trump presidency, we at least had a good economy. We had some decent foreign kind of policies in place, right? Mm-hmm. They made some major peace deals in the Middle East, right? He did do some militaristic strikes and some black ops campaigns in Yemen and Syria, things that I don't think we should have been involved on.
Remember Soleimani?
He was a scholar.
He bombed one of our bases or something, and then like a handful of days later, Trump was like, "You're gonna go bye-bye," and he went bye-bye.
Yeah, I mean, he did. Like I said, he did some good things. He's done some bad things. Talked a lot of trash on Twitter. Some of it was funny, some of it wasn't funny. Some of it should have just been like, "Hey, man, just stop, be quiet a little bit. No, just let it go. Just let it go, man." No, but at least in that situation, nations were a little bit more timid when it came to making moves. Right now, we're not seeing that.
No, and it's clear that China has absolutely no respect. I don't think it's just China, though.
North Korea has no respect.
Zero respect for the United States anymore, which normally I wouldn't really care about because I'm like, well, we're pretty well defended. I don't believe that's the case anymore. We are not prepared at all. They say we're increasing funding, but I mean, most funding? I mean,
our Navy is in great disrepair right now. They're saying, we wouldn't even be able to move troops in a timely manner that we would need to in order to engage in some sort of war to kind of defend or back up Taiwan, right? Our Air Force is still being rebuilt, right? Our military forces on the ground, our boots on the ground are going to be severely hampered because they're going to be getting rid of quite a few for not taking the vaccine.
And that's what I was about to say. What are we more worried about right now as far as the military? We're not worried about preparedness. We're not worried about if our troops are battle ready. We're worried about, are they woke enough and do they have the shot?
Yeah, do you say the right things?
I mean, it's outrageous, and that's what it is. Do you say the right, not if you do the right things. It's if you say the right things.
Do you speak the right words? Do you speak the wokeology?
And it is mind-boggling. We're going to get blown out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, we're not militarily prepared to engage in any situation, right? We, as a nation, have become weakened to the point where it's disheartening, right? I've always been a staunch patriot, right? I love my country, but never have I been more disappointed in what is going on than today. And every day, it just gets more and more disappointing to me. And that's why I wish we could have this situation where we could get left and right together to have these honest conversations and talk about it. what can we do to make things better? What do we have to do in order to get both sides to the table and compromise and fix the structure that we just decimated over the last 30 years?
Well, just wait. The election is coming up. You're going to start seeing it. The defense the left is going to use, the only defense they have is Trump, Trump, Trump.
Well, I mean, that's never stopped.
The election coming up in Virginia, coming up on the 2nd, Trump has not directly, or no, the Republican candidate, Glenn Youngkin, has not asked for Trump to come campaign for him. He doesn't.
He wants to do it on his own, essentially.
He wants to go
He wants to
alone,
stay away. He wants to stay separated from Trump, I think is what it is.
The biggest, Obama just went and rallied for the other guy.
And Biden's going down there, I think, too.
And all they do is hammer this concept home that Trump is the Republican guy. You just don't realize it's Trump, Trump, Trump. Everything is about the past now. None of it's about looking forward.
Well, I think that was the only thing that the left had that unified them as a party.
Oh, for sure.
Once Trump
and
left office, right, their kind of message is fractured.
It is. And they set themselves up for it. When you vilify and deitize this individual, once he's gone, what are you left with? That's the only thing you had. It wasn't on your policies. It wasn't on your ability to bring people together. It was Orange Man bad.
Yep, that TBS and Trump derangement syndrome.
It's a real thing, and really, that's why so many Democrats still approve of what Biden is doing or not doing.
Yeah,
is because they don't want to admit that Biden is truthfully told he is failing at every aspect of what he promised to do as a president. We do not see the man. He does not take questions. And when he does make decisions, they're bad. They're just bad decisions. And he is not a leader. Absolutely not a leader in what I would consider to be a wartime situation. He's just a failure. And I don't know if it's his fault necessarily. It's the Democratic Party for choosing. That's all they had.
Yeah, they didn't have any other superstars. There was nobody big enough that would have been able to beat Trump besides Joe Biden. But the worst part was Joe Biden ran on he was going to be the moderate in the middle again. Mm-hmm. He was going to bring back moderate policies. And he failed to do so, right? He is failing every day to do so because he continues to push this extremely far left agenda, right? And I don't think that's helping us in this point in time right now. I think you need to go back to moderation of some sort, right? I'm not saying you have to go all the way to the right, but somewhere in the middle is definitely what is necessary right now, right? We have overextended due to COVID, right? And I would blame some of this on President or the former President Trump, right? His spending through COVID, I think you could have gotten away with the first spending package. Yeah. I think you could have gotten away with the first spending package and kind of let that facilitate itself a little bit better. I don't think that you needed to do 2 or 3 of them.
No.
I definitely don't think that there should have been this massive amount of funding going to corporations, right? Nope. You can help the mom and pop businesses, and I think that you give the vast majority of that in cash to the average citizen, and I think that you would be able to ride that out a lot longer than just throwing cash everywhere. And there's still cash that's not been spent from all 3 packages, So President Trump, or the former President Trump, he did some horrible monetary policies that did not help. It did not facilitate what we needed to get done, right? And now we've got President Biden right now, who is only making it worse by continuing to allow this spending to go out. If you're talking about $5.5 trillion being blown up right now.
And they're phrasing it as if we don't spend this, our democracy is going to fail.
Yeah, and they're talking about everything coming to a complete standstill, and it's not true. The spending you're doing now is causing this massive amount of inflation going through. It's causing these massive amounts of shortages. We're seeing jobs. The unemployment rate is not increasing. The GDP is not going up where it's supposed to be at. Right? There's all of these underlying conditions that we're seeing in the data that is clearly not being listened to, right? We're just ignoring it and acting like it didn't happen.
See no evil, hear no evil, just cover your eyes.
I mean, it's all going to be okay. Cross your fingers, and let's knock on wood and ride it out.
No, I'm done with all that nonsense. It needs to stop. All of it needs to stop. I'm really hoping the Virginia race goes the Republican way. That'd be great as a start.
That would be
As a start.
Even if it's close, even if this race is close, it'd be the most flooring thing you'll see because Virginia's been blue for a long time.
And it is close. It
right?
Is all the polling says it's close. I mean,
if it actually, even if your Democrat wins, I think if this race is within 2 points,
that'd be sweet.
Democrats are going to be extremely upset about it. They're going to be a little bit scared, right? And maybe that pushes the conversation to coming back towards the middle. Right.
Nice. Yeah.
And I think that is what we really need is it doesn't, I'm not saying that Republicans have to win across the board all over the place and this just be nothing but red.
That's true.
But I think you need to be able to force the left to come back to the middle and you have to be able to force the right to come back to the middle. Right. And maybe
that
see
be
the start.
Nice? That would be fun. I think that would be fun.
I mean, that would be unheard of right now, I think. But it's what is, I think, necessary at this point in time.
That's what we teach our children growing up. Compromise.
Yeah, don't hit your brother, right? Share the toy, right? You teach them.
If you're trying to take a toy from him and he hits you back, like you probably should just not try to take it from him. I definitely am one of those parents that say if you start the fight, then you get hit, like, well, that's kind of your fault. You probably shouldn't try to start the fight.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you there, right? That's kind of why I say that, like, kids these days need a bully, right?
Yeah, you got to figure out how to deal with it.
You have to be able to deal with adversity.
Yeah. Yes. If you're just handed everything and the parents solve every problem when you're a child, what do you do when you grow up and realize, like, I don't have a parent to tell my boss that I don't have to be there on time?
Yeah, it's not conducive to growth.
I mean,
I think that's what it is. It's just not conducive to growth. It doesn't teach you, how to deal with situations that are a bit excessive or over the top, right? It doesn't teach you that not everything is going to go your way, but it also builds character as a person, right? It gives you that ability to have kind of a hard shell so that maybe not everything affects you, right? It doesn't bother you emotionally all the time, right? It doesn't destroy your emotions, right? But it does build this kind of carapace that you're able to use as, well, I don't care what he says, right? I'm going to do it anyways because that's my mental fortitude.
Remember, that's I don't know the right word for it. It's a great thing to possess, though. That ability that I don't care what they say. I'm going to do what I want to do because I believe it. I truly believe it. I'm not going to follow what everybody else does. That's a beautiful thing. It's the rebellion, but I don't know the right word for it. It is a rebellion, essentially, but the ability to not care is beautiful.
And I try to teach that, to my kids, that there is time to kind of buck the system, and there are times to comply, right?
There's a time and place for everything.
If you're in a situation where you're 100% right and there's a moral conviction, right, then obviously you can't comply, right?
Correct.
There's obviously something inside you that says that you have to throw the rules and do what you've got to do. But there are other times where you're there's somebody in a position of authority that's going to tell you what to do or how to do something. And maybe they've been doing it a lot longer. You don't have that same experience, right? You've got to kind of capitulate and learn something from them.
So, like, we'll throw an example. Like, if you get pulled over by an officer for speeding, you should probably you might believe in your heart that you weren't speeding, but just ride with it, man.
Yeah.
Don't fight. Just be like, all right, whatever. You may believe in your heart you were speeding, but don't sit there and try to fight him.
Yeah,
don't argue
with him. You've got some cops that are bad, some cops that are good.
Exactly. Just time and a place, right?
If you think you're being mistreated, you get a badge number, you get a name.
You take them to court.
And
whatever that is.
File a complaint.
There you go.
There are procedures and steps to go through.
Yes.
And that's something that people need to learn, right? There's a time and a place for bucking the rules, and there's a time and a place to say, you know what,
live to fight another day.
Yeah.
This is not the hill I'm going to die on. This speeding trap is not going to be the downfall of me.
Yep, and there are hills that are worth dying on.
There are.
And there are others that, it is what it is.
I want to die on a hill.
The grassy knoll.
No, we'd be skydiving. And then we land on a hill, and I think that'd be fun. I mean, it'd probably be a really scary way to die, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say skydiving would be like the worst way. Well, not the worst.
You know,
because you just see it. Like the worst way would be drowning. That's just me.
That would suck. Yeah, because you know what's happening. I mean, I think everybody wants to probably go in their sleep, but
a nice and peaceful lake.
So you just don't go swimming if you're worried about dying while you're drowning.
Yeah, but you could always just get bumped unconscious and fall in the puddle. I mean, that's possible. You can dry drown, Miles.
Horrible.
You ever heard of that?
How do you drown without water?
If you inhale water into your lungs, you can actually drown from the little bits of fluid in your lungs.
We should probably stay away from water then.
Altogether.
All kinds of water.
I'm drinking water.
It could kill you. There's a real thing out there I just heard. Don't drink that water.
Oh, jeez. And with that,
we should probably go.
We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Just want to say thanks for, listening to us ramble.
Yeah, we missed a lot of topics today. I'm actually sad. There was a lot of things we should have discussed. It's been busy. I mean, it's going to be busy next week, too, so don't get us wrong. But
it was a productive conversation today, though. I think getting out this conversation that we've had today is important, especially in this unification that we want to push. Listening to both sides and being able to do something in the middle and come together, I think is the biggest thing we could ever hope to accomplish.
So if we had a song for today, what would it be? Like, what's that Beatles song, Come Together?
Oh, I was thinking High School Musicals. We're all in this together.
Oh, man. That works too. Maybe we should do like a song of the day or a song of the week every time we have a podcast.
It would always be Friday by Rebecca Black.
No, we can't play that. It only can be played on Friday. I played that song.
You blew it. I warned you.
I know.
I warned you.
I caused the pandemic and everything that happened. I'm sorry.
Blame it on Miles.
Sorry.
It's 100% him.
My bad.
Alright, well, thanks for joining us on We Articulate Podcast, where if you know, you know.
And if you don't, well, ask somebody who does.
Alright, go ahead and share, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we will see you
later.
Alright.
Bye, guys.
Bye.